panel discussion. When we sat down as a group, we thought, what should we talk about? And the thing that came up was one of the hot topics is stress. We all feel like we're experts on stressing and thought maybe you guys would too, and thought that we would explore what is stress, what does it do to our body, and how can we reframe stress so that it becomes a positive thing in our life. But we asked Jacob to join us, and we thought we'd take the first few minutes. He had such amazing information this morning, so people wanted to ask him a few questions. So if you had some questions related to what he talked about this morning or anything in general, feel free to ask a question. Yes? We're going to spend about 5 minutes. Yeah.
I exercise maybe 5 days a week, but my upper body is still so weak. Now, I heard what you say about muscle, what you said about muscles. I can't even do yoga because I can't do down dogs and everything because of my upper body.
Sorry, testing. Okay. Well, first off, congrats on exercising 5 days a week. That's amazing. The thing we found about resistance training or like weightlifting type stuff, it's all relative to you. So, for example, let's say that I'm trying to work my shoulders, and so I'm doing side laterals, okay? So let's say that like maybe someone in the audience might be able to lift 30 pounds for 10 reps. But let's say my friend may only be able to lift their arms, and by the time they get to 10, they can't do anymore. That's okay. Because for you, you would literally start by doing all these exercises with just in the air with just your body parts. Because the thing you want to understand is that you want to get on your own perceived exertion by the last set to around 10. So what I recommend people starting off is they select a weight on the first set that maybe allows them to do a set of anywhere from 8 to 20 reps. That's your variation zone. And the first set, maybe you're at a 5 out of 10. The second set, you want to get to a 7 or 8 out of 10. And the last one, you want to be a 10 out of 10. Then you move to the next body part. So that, and then it could be, if, for example, say you're moving your arm and it's a 10 out of 10 is just your own body weight, you have a partner who's helping you lift the first 10 on the first set until you get to the last. So everything's all relative to you. That's key.
Yes, Lisa.
That's a great question, and these guys are going to talk a lot about, like, there's a lot of obviously cognitive effects of stress, and they're going to talk a lot about that. Physiologically, stress manifests itself like in muscle tension. And so one of the things we do, it's actually a technique that you can use to stretch, but it's also a technique you can use to relieve stress. Basically, what happens is your muscles have a protective mechanism in them, so you don't over damage them. You ever hear like the things where like the mom, her baby gets like trapped under something heavy, and this little 115-pound mom lifts it off over the kid? Well, they get adrenaline, and all these protective mechanisms are gone. And then the baby saves the kid, but they're also injured, and they have to go to the hospital. Well, one of the things is when we contract our muscles really hard, our nervous system sends a signal to relax. So as strange as this sounds, if you have tension in your traps, if you squeeze them like hard like this and then let go, you'll send your body will send signals to relax the traps. So at the end of the day, and same thing, it's in the brows too. So if you kind of squeeze your brows really, really hard and release it, that will happen. On top of that, through feedback, you'll learn what that relaxation feels like. So you start to notice the difference between tension and relaxation. And you can do that over your whole body and feel what relaxation feels like to tension, and you can actually get so good that you can trigger that response immediately.
How can you tell if you're just an average person what your level is, if you're like a non-responder, a moderate responder, or an extreme responder to exercise?
That's a great question. Obviously, no one in here is average because you all came out here. But but as far as training is concerned, The thing I would say is it's just how you literally extreme responders make rapid gains.
Yeah, I'm not that.
Okay.
So what would be,
Yeah.
what would it,
So moderate responders are you make gains every week. Maybe you're making 2% to 5% gains a month. That's a moderate responder.
Okay.
A non-responder is I'm continually lifting and stuff like this, and I see no progress. Now, part of that could be the stem cell thing. Part of it could be that you're not changing exercise. There's different reasons why we don't respond. You have to ask yourself, did I respond to this in the past? If you did, you have to go, am I just because I've been doing the same thing? Then you change it. The other thing is, I work with high-level athletes, for example, sometimes that they are not getting any rest, so they're no longer responding. But it also could be the fact that, from a nutrition standpoint, you're not providing the proper nutrition. There's so many different things. Sleep, people almost don't understand how important sleep is, for example. So basically, like sleep, for example, you can actually develop signs of type 2 diabetes just from sleep deprivation. So yeah. So sleep deprivation, there's a number of things. One, it makes us less sensitive to insulin, which is a sign of type 2 diabetes. It makes us very hungry. Very hungry. So you're not just cranky, you're more hungry. And then you eat more. So you're not very sensitive to insulin. You can't handle carbs as well, but you want to eat more of them. And so it reflects in your blood glucose levels. So that's why sleep becomes sleep hygiene is critical.
You touched upon this, but this is something that I really want to understand more in layman's terms, heart rate variation and how that has to do with good health. And how do you measure it?
Yeah, so heart rate variability is super interesting. Actually, it's a real important topic to stress management. Our heart beat has variation in it. It's not just uniform, ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. There's variation between beats. So who's heard of heart rate variability? Okay, so heart rate variability is there's variation between beats. When I am very stressed and my sympathetic fight or flight response system is higher, right? Adrenaline's high, variation's less between beats. When I'm chill, relaxed, my parasympathetic rest and digest is more controlling things. There's more variation between beats, okay? So what happens is, and we use this actually with a lot of our professional athletes, Tony Robbins even uses it, when your heart rate variability is really low all the time, it means you're super stressed all the time. Or you're working out too much. Or, maybe you've had a fight with your significant other. Is a combination of things. If you're always like that, that's a problem. So what we do is, we use it for training is where we use it in our thing. If someone comes in with a very low heart rate variability, they're super stressed, well, we give them a light training program. If they have higher heart rate variabilities, they're chill, they're recovered, they can train harder. But if it's that, and you can measure it by wearables, and that's one of the things that I think is going to be huge in the future is wearable technology. Cigna, who's here, basically they're developing a whole suite of wearables that measure these types of physiological variables. And so you're wearing them all day. And because one thing I found in science, when you do research, everyone's different. They show you average, everyone's different. So you're on your own experiment, and the only way to change that is through wearables where you're actually monitoring your own physiology. And so that, I think, is huge. It's the future. It's the future of healthcare.
Wow, that's just so fascinating. So we can shift now to maybe focusing on stress and asking the doctors. And so you all know Therese and Doro, and I think you know Dr. Tracy Freeman. She's our Chief Medical Officer. She is awesome. A lot of people have gone to her. And everybody knows Ashley Forgey. Ashley is our dietitian nutritionist on the BB&R team. She does our newsletters. And Ashley just had a brand new baby. Yes. Chandler. And so we were like, yes, stress. We can look at stress through Ashley's eyes. But this question's for you. Tell us, if I come into you and I come to your office, how do you know I'm stressed? What is it that you look for when you see me?
So I have to say most people that come in are stressed. I think it's a culture we have here in Washington in that we are a do, and do some more people. We're a group of people who don't really know how to say no. Like, we go to events after work, we have family, there's so much going on. The thing is that what people don't realize is that stress has a physiological effect, right? So it's been linked to 5 out of 6 causes of death. The top causes of death. So we're talking about cancer, heart disease, accident, respiratory disease, and suicide. So when you think about it, how does that happen? What is the physiologic? Like he mentioned the mother lifting the car off the baby. So that is a fight or flight response. The thing is, that's the one place the body actually relaxes the blood vessels, is in the muscle. But for the rest of the body, it's tightening up and it's sending blood through at a fast rate. So what happens when you're stressed day to day to day to day? Does your body really know the difference between lifting the car off the baby and dealing with the fact that you have a rude boss? Not really. You know, it still goes into maybe not the same degree of fight or flight, but there's a degree of fight or flight there or freeze. Some people can't get anything done, right? Where you just aren't at your peak. And so we have to learn to come out of that. And you see it, so diabetes is linked to stress because stress raises your blood sugar. You know, insomnia, you can't sleep, you're wired and tired because of the stress that's going on. You're stressed all day and then you're like, oh, I finally get to sleep, but then you're laying up looking at the ceiling. You know, all these things you have to take into account. Even the best, I think, example is people who sweat nonstop. So that's a physiologic fight or flight response. And there are people going to get Botox in their armpits to stop that. But the reality is that sometimes that doesn't even work. I've seen it when I've given people, you know, things to kind of calm them and put them back in a homeostasis, that within a month they stop sweating. And Botox wouldn't work in their case. So it's an amazing thing what the body does, and it's doing it out of love for us. It's trying to help us, trying to protect us, trying to get us through the day in what it's interpreted as you barely making it through the desert with no food and a family to feed on top of that or something. It just really is trying its best to just make it so that you survive. And once you do that, though, we need to learn to say, okay, we've made it through our stress, now let's back it up. I don't have all the answers for those kind of mindful things, but I know someone who does right beside me. So I think Doro should speak to how we do the mindful piece of this.
So like the solutions, like
Right.
what do you do to reframe stress?
So stress, to add on to what Tracy says, isn't caused by events in the outside world. It's caused by our reaction to them. And from a mindful perspective, I would add that judgment determines if something that's neutral is good or bad. So for example, I was on the George Washington Parkway recently, and I was rushing, and I bumped into a traffic jam. And I got all panicky and nervous and annoyed and stressed. But the truth is, the traffic jam just is. It's a traffic jam. And I was putting my judgment onto the traffic jam as being something terrible and awful. And the reality is, I could do nothing about it. So mindfully, I try to step back and realize this is just a traffic jam. I'm gonna live through this experience. And then I take it one step further, and rather than, and believe me, the panicky feeling, you all know, will keep coming back because I'm supposed to be someplace. But what you try to do is take long, deep breaths, and then think about things that might bring you joy. So I started to think about Christmas Eve, when all my family would be there. Now, not everyone gets joy out of thinking about Christmas Eve. I get joy thinking about Christmas Eve because this year all my children will be there and all my family. So I started to think about that and think about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna serve enchiladas. That gets me really excited. I'm gonna, think about Mexican food and where can I get it, and that's how I try to shift my thinking and put my judgment to bed and get through a stressful situation.
So I think what you're saying is it's really your mind. So your
Yes.
body reacts to your mind and to your thoughts, right?
Right, exactly.
And so if we could reframe our thoughts, as Dora does in traffic, and people start honking, and you're like, oh, wait, I got to go.
Yeah.
It can change your health. And when you started talking earlier about sleep, right? I mean, stress inhibits sleep. So it's really important to be looking at stress and reframing it as we're doing. Ashley, tell us about you and where you're at, and how did you reframe new motherhood?
Yeah, I'm happy to say I think I'm doing a good job based on what I'm hearing. I think the biggest thing for me, my daughter was born at the end of July. She's perfect. But one of the things that I've done that's been so helpful for me is really letting go of the expectations. It's a crazy, wild ride in the first few weeks, as many of you know, and so I think not trying to do everything all the time. It's never going to happen when there's a crying baby or a hungry baby or a wet diaper or whatever. But also just really trying to embrace every moment, the good moments, the not so good moments, the really hard moments, and recognizing that just it's okay if the laundry sits in the dryer for 2 days, or I forget to brush my teeth a lot. But the baby's really happy and nourished, and I'm healthy, and I think those are the important things. And also remembering what my priorities are. One of my priorities, no matter what stage I'm at in my life, is movement. So my movement these days looks very different than it did before a baby, but really taking advantage of any time I have to move my body. Sometimes it means I can get a little bit of exercise in when my baby's napping. She doesn't nap right now, so I'm pushing a stroller around the city a lot, and that's sort of my workout right now. But remembering what your priorities were before the big life stressor, I think has been really helpful.
Therese.
So what I think is that all of our lives need editing, that there's things that each one of us can do to change the way we look at things. And a lot of times we don't take care of ourselves because we're so busy taking care of everyone else that it winds up we're resentful, we're mad, no one appreciates me, I can't believe how hard this is, nobody understands it. But I think that if we all just really leave this conference with some of the tools that we've learned and do things for ourselves. So for instance, I've tried to meditate, and I can't. I start paying my bills and I do all different things and whatever. So what I do is I take my coffee outside on my deck, and that's my meditation. And Tricia taught me to look for little miracles, whether it's two birds humming and whatever, and I'm amazed at how many animals I figured out that are in my backyard that I didn't know were back there. And then the other important thing is everything doesn't cost money. You can call an old friend, meeting a friend. How many times do we put off calling someone and just, you don't have to go to dinner, just have coffee, just get together, go for a walk. But there's nothing like having a relationship with someone other than your spouse or partner that understands you. And it's a way that we can all, it's kind of therapy session without having therapy, but a lot of times we forget that our friends are a great tool that we can do. And then one more thing that I've learned to do, I've actually learned it from a TCM doctor. I soak my feet at night. I take away all of my aches, my pains. I just run the hot water and I soak my feet, and it's amazing. It's how much better I sleep. It's a way that there's no electronics, there's nothing. I just take 15 minutes, I soak my feet, there's no TV on, I light a candle, and I listen to music. So I just think that, all of us look at your life and see what simple changes you can do just to take that little bit so that you're taking care of yourself, because if we don't take care of ourselves and we're not happy, the ones around us aren't happy. So.
Thanks, that's excellent. Tracy and Jacob, we talk a lot again about stress and what it does to our body, and what does it do to the immune system? when stress happens?
So it lowers it. Part, as you can imagine, part of the reason why you might go through a stressful period and then you catch a cold, right? Like, or I just had to move my house and my office and I got the flu. I knew why. I knew it's because I didn't take the time for that. But definitely, like, your white cell counts, your natural killer cells will decline. And so you're a little bit more vulnerable as a result.
And again, that's because of fight or flight, right? So your body thinks that it's being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. And so everything non-essential has to turn off in order to save you. So if you're going to be bit, your blood gets thicker, right? So that all happens. And the immune system shuts down to save energy so that you can run as fast as you can away from the saber-toothed tiger.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So
So
we
I
don't
even
have
see
any-
on blood work, people who have chronic stress, their white counts are lower than most. So white count normal on LabCorp might be about 4 to 12, and they'll be 3 to, very low. And when I see that, I'm like, likely this is stress going on here. We need to get to work.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, when I was back in university doing research, we used to research stress, and an easy situation is finals. So during finals week, sickness rates would go up big time. That's what when you're doing finals, everyone's sniffling, coughing. That's because of stress. But we did something where we took select students, and then we taught them how to think about things during those situations. And then they had like less incidents of sickness and stuff, which tells you that certainly there's some things we can't do anything about, but going back to your point originally, how we think about the stress determines whether there actually really is a stress.
Right.
If I'm sitting in traffic, you'd be like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Or like this week, for example, I flew up to, I haven't been home forever, and I had just come from Chicago. I went home for a day, and then I flew up to Abu Dhabi. And
Just a little flight over to Abu
yeah,
Dhabi.
God, it's you're like you're a day's gone. Like it's 21 hours like travel time. And so I was in the airport, and my first flight was late. I missed the flight. This flight's late. So, and you only get one out a day, and so I was like, okay, like it could have destroyed me, but I was like, no, cool, it's time for me I can catch up on a lot of work for a day, right? Even though my mind would have exploded first. And then I just took out the flight the next day, you know what I mean? And so that's why like I can come from Abu Dhabi and be super excited and stuff to speak and not completely wiped out. It's just like how you interpret it makes a big deal to determine whether it affects your immune system or not.
I was just thinking about, I don't know how many of you were with us when John Kabat-Zinn was here. And he taught us that. He just said, it's just about being in that moment. And whatever happens in that moment, you're equipped to handle. And no matter what it is. And I think, we talk a lot about bioindividuality when we talk about nutrition. What diet serves me may not serve Jacob or Tracy or Doro. So we need to know what nourishes us, but we also need to know that in the mind end of things, right? The things that nourish us. And with Doro, it's enchiladas for Christmas Eve. And that's really fun. And that just brings a lot of joy. So she has experienced it. And what he also taught us is that our thoughts are things that our body is experiencing. And Therese just said, could we kind of explore the stories that we tell ourselves and the way that we make things up? And Dora, you want to explain that with that?
Well, and I'm guilty of this, but I'll be someplace and someone will give me a side-eye glance and I'll be like, oh my God, they are so mad at me. They're mad at me because, and I'll know the full reason why they're mad at me. And of course, they weren't even looking at me at all, which is another humbling story. But anyway, we make up stories in our heads and then we believe them. And the truth is, when we're mindful, we know not to believe our thoughts because they're simply thoughts and they're not necessarily real. Most of the time they're negative and most of the time they're not productive. So when we're mindful, we're able to notice and become aware of what's going on in our crazy heads.
What about breath breath work. Do you all have anything to add to that about what our bodies do when we take deep breaths and when we do short breaths? Do you have a study on that, Jacob?
Yeah. Well, okay. So if I'm stressed here, it turns out in my physiology. But if I start my physiology, it actually feeds back to my brain. So, which is actually kind of cool. That's why I talked about this relaxation thing with the traps. But there's a scientist, I can't remember his name, but he said something simple. He goes, you can't be stressed if you're relaxed. Like,
It's not possible.
Yeah. So I was like, but when I read that, I was like, well, it's easy to say, you know what I mean? But his point was that, like, what are the things you do when you're not stressed? Like, you're breathing, like, deeper. You're more relaxed. Well, what if you start it by literally just taking deep breaths, like, and filling your tummy up? Like, most of the time we're not, like, we're talking to people, we're holding our stomach in, we're holding ourselves up tight, we're taking small breaths. That's kind of stressful. Right. But what happens when you're at home, you're watching TV, your stomach's hanging out, you know what I mean? And you're just flipping channels. Well, you can do that, it's okay, if you just take a second to relax, breathe deep, but don't just breathe up here, breathe all the way through your stomach, and then like deep, fill the breath, let it fill your stomach, and release it. And studies show that actually lowers tension in your mind. You can actually achieve a different state. So yeah, you can regulate you can change your physiology to change this too.
Yeah, by using your breath work. Trace, do you have anything about that when people come in? Do you have to tell them to breathe? Live, love, and breathe?
So I'm guilty myself. I say I'm right there with you, for sure. But we see, I would say the one thing that gives us the example of what happens when you don't breathe regularly is sleep apnea. So we know for sure if you spend a 30-year time sleeping, basically, if all is going well, you should be sleeping well. And some people aren't getting air at night. And so what does oxygen do for us? It actually serves as a barrier. It's a protector. It helps. It nourishes us. Things of that nature. So you can see, they're more obese. They have higher blood pressure. They can eventually have heart failure on a right-sided heart failure. Things of that nature. The air is so vital. And it's just we're meant to have it. And I find myself holding my breath, and then I'm like, breathe, remind myself, you gotta breathe. It's a constant work, but it's necessary. We have to kind of keep ourselves going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest tools to get us breathing and to help relax us is a technique called the 4-7-8, and it's
How many of you know that, the 4-7-8? Yeah.
Okay, everybody
Dr.
knows
Wiles. Yeah, sure.
Everybody knows it, but I'll still share it. It's where you take a very long, audible exhale, and then you breathe in for the count of 4. You hold for the count of 7, and then you exhale for the count of 8. And it's an...
Yeah, do you want to try it? You want to do 2 rounds with everybody?
Okay.
We'll follow you. We'll follow Doro.
Okay, let's all do...
Sort of sit up.
Sit up. We're going to do a long, loud, audible exhale. Ready, go. Breathe it in for the count of 4. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8.
Yeah. You can feel the difference. That's like pranayama breathing for the yogis in here. It's like that, but it's Dr. Wiles' adaptation of 4-7-8. Ashley, can you talk to us about herbs and Tracy, I'm going to ask you the same question, herbs or any kind of vitamins that you think we should all be taking to help us with stress, but also for just general health?
Yeah. I think in any time in your life that you're going through something really stressful, like we talked about, it really gets to your immune system. So anything that you can do to bolster your immune system, and what I really love to share with people is the quality of the food that you're eating is so, so important. So I prefer for everyone that I work with to really choose organic and local food whenever you can for your produce. The protein that you're eating, your meats, grass-fed meats have higher nutritional quality than those that are produced conventionally. For any poultry that you're eating, free-range, organic are the best choices. And then really choosing high-quality fats. But in terms of vitamins, of course, vitamin C is really important. That's something that I continue to supplement right now because being pregnant, having a baby, those are all stressful events.
What kind of vitamin C, like ester C, or which C do you like?
Oh, gosh.
Regular
C?
vitamin C.
Yeah.
You know, the studies are kind of on a basic one and still flying high. Okay. You know, so it's
Ester C is a little more expensive.
right, and I think that it's the one you feel good on. So I would just take it, like make that one change and see, do you feel more energized? Are you clearer? Do you have more energy? Then that's good for you. Your body wants it. It's giving you a signal that that was fuel for you. And so what's fuel for me is not fuel for everyone else. So play with it.
Can you tell us about ashwagandha?
Really high vitamin C foods can be a good place to start.
High vitamin C foods. Also, water and hydration. Could somebody speak about that?
Right, so your cells need water. We're majority water. So, and that's kind of, we're electrical beings, whether we recognize it or not, and it's how we get the circuitry running.
And
So-
most of the time, we're dehydrated, right? I mean, it's warm in here now, so if you haven't been drinking, you know, and all of a sudden you become low energy, you know, and you're like, maybe I need a candy bar, but maybe it's water, you know? And do you have anything to say about that, Jacob, in terms of hydration and exercise and?
Yeah, I mean, hydration super important for sure. Actually, so we do like with athletes and stuff like that. Most of them, like I used to do studies with basketball players, and they're like, you look at their diets, horrible. Like it is, and they hydrate basically with like a Coke or something like that. You know what I mean? And but one way to know the question is like, how do I know if I'm hydrated? Well, you can always look at like, you look at your pee, basically, it should be light like lemonade. And that's kind of how you know if it's like dark or something, like beer, it's no-go. Light like lemonade, you're good. So drink to that effect. And then if you are thirsty, our thirst mechanism is behind. You know, essentially, it's a little behind. When you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So you want to kind of not get to that point, so.
Yeah. And Tracy, you had mentioned the herb ashwagandha. I thought maybe you could share that with everybody. That's one of my favorites. And
Right, so there's a class of herbs called adaptogenic herbs. Basically, they're designed that if you're kind of stressing out, they'll bring you down a little bit. Also, if you're way out of energy, they'll bring you up a little bit. Most of us need to come down a notch or two. So the ashwagandha that she's mentioning, it's a long word, but it is spelled exactly as I said it. It's like ashwagandha. You can find that in Whole Foods or any health food store. It comes in teas. Holy basil's another good one, and very relaxing. Holy basil and ashwagandha, if you're having trouble sleeping, will lower that cortisol. So some of us, our cortisol, which is like a part of that fight or flight response, will rise up too early. And so you're waking up with a start. Your body's thinks you're in a cave and a wild animal's gonna get you. You know, it's very primitive. So it wakes you up to say, protect us, get up. You've got enough sleep to survive. But the holy basil and ashwagandha before bed will lower that cortisol and just relax you. You can do it all day long too, but it definitely will help you to stay more stable at nighttime.
And something to add to that is, you know, we separate day and night, but we are the same body, up at day and to bed at night. So what your day looks like, oftentimes that's what your sleep looks like. So it is really important to pay attention. If you are waking up at 3 a.m, that could be your cortisol. So you do need to start thinking about doing your breath work at that hour, taking your ashwagandha, different kinds of gentle ways to support yourself during those more stressful times. And our bodies get in a habit, right, of being stressed. So paying attention to those signs is important. Trace?
So what I think also is important, that everyone sign up for our newsletter. Everyone look at our program and look at the newsletter. Because right now, we're going to be focusing on changing. We all need to eat differently as the seasons change. And we'll be working with Ashley, and she'll be providing that information. We also talk about our gut. We talked a little bit about the stress in our gut and stuff. I mean, there's different things. I know I have a damp gut, so certain foods work for me that don't work for others. So we're lucky to have Tracy on our team that can help us with that. Tricia can help us. We're all here. So it's a great way. Our resources are in. I'm doing a plug for us. But honestly, we could be up here all day talking about different things, but our newsletter really does cover those topics. And I think Tricia and Doro now have a health, you want to talk about your
Health gig.
your health gig?
Has anybody listened to Health Gig? Oh, yes. Thank you. Doro, can you tell them about Health
So,
Gig?
yes, and more self-promotion here. But Tricia and I host a podcast called Health Gig, and we interview people in the wellness industry and people outside of the wellness industry, like country music stars, presidents, CEOs of companies. And we talk about what makes people healthy and happy. And Tricia and I have a lot of fun doing it. We learn so much ourselves interviewing these amazing people.
In fact, I think it was actually during series. My daughter Jenna said, "Did you hear you say, 'Oh my God, she's amazing'?" And Doro saying, "Yeah, she's amazing."
Yeah, a little editorial.
Wow.
We're more professional now, but we do think you're amazing, Siri.
We do.
But it's a lot of fun. I hope, and it's on iTunes. It's wherever you can find podcasts, we're there, and we hope you'll listen in.
We just love today so much. Just love gathering here and talking about things that are so important and just sharing it with all of you. So the opportunity for us to do the podcast has been great because we can do it weekly and share some of the information that we're learning that we can't wait to share with all of you. Is there anything else from our stellar panel? Because we're running out of time. Is that it? Okay, so we are going to get going, and our next speaker is Chris Exley. Thank you, guys.